It is a fact that having an extraordinarily talented superstar like Luka Doncic as your team's franchise player definitely requires a certain sense of urgency from your front office. Mavs GM Nico Harrison definitely understands this, which is why he's not necessarily obsessing about future draft picks. Instead, he's trying to put as much win-now talent around Luka Doncic as he can, and he's been doing that quite well the past couple of seasons. After providing Luka with a co-star in Kyrie Irving during last year's trade deadline, the Mavs front office continued to be proactive in the offseason, adding players who appear to be complementary fits with what they have been building around Luka and Kyrie. They added Dante Exum, who as a lengthy connector/defender is a much more valuable piece in the context of this Dallas team than say a bucket like Spencer Dinwiddie. The Mavs also added Derrick Jones Jr., who's a player in the mold of your typical athletic 3-and-D guy, but who offers something more than what Reggie Bullock provides with a sharp shooting, while also having a wider defensive range than Dorian Finney-Smith. Even the team's most recent lottery pick and big man Dereck Lively is already appearing to be much more useful than Christian Wood ever was for Dallas. However, after a slow start to the 2024 season, the Mavs knew that they needed to continue modifying their roster if they were to shift themselves from the middle of the Western Conference into having a legitimate shot for deep playoff contention, which is why during the recent trade deadline, the Mavs made a couple more significant moves, acquiring big man Daniel Gafford from the Wizards, as well as versatile forward PJ Washington, plus 2 future second-rounders from the Charlotte Hornets. And in exchange for those assets, Dallas gave up a reasonable haul consisting of role players in Grant Williams, Seth Curry, and Richaun Holmes, as well as a 2027 first-round pick and a 2024 first-round pick, which they also acquired from OKC earlier in the trade deadline. Overall, I don't think Dallas has ever had this many players capable of two-way production before during the entire Luka Doncic era. But the question is, how much better have the Mavs really become after the trade deadline, and what's actually next for them? So what's good everyone, it's Real Balls here, and today, let's dive deeper into what the trades for PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford really mean for the Dallas Mavericks, both for the present and the immediate future. Let's get to it. First, let's talk about Daniel Gafford, who's been the more straightforward addition for the Mavs right off the bat, as in his first 2 games with Dallas while starting in place for the injured Dereck Lively, Gafford has put up crazy counting stats of 17.5 points, 13 rebounds, 3 blocks, and a steal per game. And while he surely won't continue putting up such monster numbers every game, with his skill set, you could expect him to keep filling the gaps in those areas of the game where the Mavs have always lacked something. Well, first, on defense, Gafford tries to contest everything at the rim. He's contested 9.2 shots at the rim per game this season, which is the 4th highest in the entire NBA despite him playing just around 26 minutes per game. Opponents also shot 58% at the rim against him this season, which is an above average defensive mark for a center. This kind of defensive activity from a big man is something that Dallas will need, especially when Dereck Lively is on the bench. But beyond that though, Gafford's offensive fit is also seemingly perfect in Dallas. He's one of the best rim runners you'll find in the entire NBA, as a guy who's made over 71% of his shots over the past 2 seasons, while mostly operating as a lob threat around the basket. Gafford's size, athleticism, and wide catch radius always demands defenses to clog the paint, cause if you don't tag him, it's going to be an easy dunk. But the thing is, now in Dallas, even if you tag him as he rolls to the basket, this should just create potential openings for Luka Doncic to find teammates on the corners with some easy kick-out passes. Here, you can see Dallas running a horn set for Luka Doncic. Gafford acts as a second screener, and immediately you can see how the pick-and-roll action sucks the defense into the paint. This leaves PJ Washington wide open on the weak side, and as expected, Luka finds him with a skip pass as PJ drains the corner 3 against the late closeout. Overall, the addition of Daniel Gafford just ensures that the Mavericks now will have 48 minutes of tough rim protection and elite rim running every single game, which is something that they lacked in the minutes that Dereck Lively was on the bench. As with Lively on the court this season, the Mavs are a plus 5.5 points per 100 possessions, but with him on the bench, they are a minus 3.4 per 100. But now let's move on to PJ Washington, who's the more high profile among the Mavs' 2 new players, and for good reason, because standing 6'5" 6'7" with a 7'3" wingspan and a 34-inch max vertical, Washington is the type of athlete that opponents will surely feel on the court on both ends. He's also an inch taller than the player he's replacing in Grant Williams, but for sure, the difference between Washington and Williams will be more substantial than just that. First of all though, it's worth noting that while with the Hornets, Washington's role actually changed constantly. However, in Dallas, his role will definitely be more consistent as a heavy-minute 3-and-D player, but with a far more advanced shot creation skill set than most players who have filled that role for Dallas in the Luka Doncic era. But first, the three-point shot definitely has to arrive. After his first 2 games with the Mavs, he's only made 1 3-pointer out of 9 attempts. But historically, PJ has been an above-average floor spacer who even shot 39% from deep in his sophomore season. This season though for Charlotte, his three-point percentage has dipped to 32%. However, if you're a Mavs fan, you should be optimistic with how he's always been comfortable launching shots from deep while also on high volume. And looking at it, Luka Doncic has a history of helping players drastically improve their outside shooting percentages by gifting them with wide open looks off pinpoint passes. Another thing is, while in Charlotte, with injuries and absences from guys like LaMelo Ball, Gordon Hayward, and Miles Bridges, over the past 2 seasons, PJ was actually asked to create a bit more offense and to have the ball in his hands a lot more than he's used to. In fact, last season, PJ even registered the 3rd highest usage in Charlotte, only behind LaMelo Ball and Terry Rozier. Well, sure, because of that, he did average a career-high 15 points per game back in 2023, but as a result of the increased usage, his efficiency also dropped to just 44.5% from the field and just around 32% from deep the past 2 seasons. But now in Dallas, PJ won't be burdened to do much with the ball, and even if he was asked to do a little bit more, you better believe that the advantages that Luka and Kyrie would create for him would be more significant than the advantages that LaMelo Ball and Terry Rozier opened up for him in Charlotte. This should prompt PJ to explore his scoring options more in Dallas. After all, he is an incredible straight-line driver and an athletic shot creator who knows how to use his size and touch around the paint, and given his bounce, is also adept at using off-ball screens in order to catch lobs around the basket. In this play, Kyrie has the ball in his hands, but noticing that Washington's defender is closing into the paint, he makes the quick pass to PJ on the wings. Watch him just use his speed to blow by Aaron Wiggins on the closeout before he asserts his length on the Euro step as he drains the contested floater. Then this time, you can see PJ setting the early high screen for Luka. Then soon after, you can see Kyrie setting a pin down screen, allowing PJ to get switched to the smaller Isaiah Joe in the paint. Luka sees the mismatch and just throws the lob to PJ, who easily finishes at the basket. But for sure, the other part of the equation here for PJ is how much impact he can bring on the defensive end. Although his effort level has dropped down the past couple seasons, at 6'7" with a 7'3" wingspan while also having quick feet, active hands, and a strong chest, Washington is a capable defender who can effectively match up against bigger wings and even bigger guards. If he regains his focus in that end, he will be a very effective switch defender in the playoffs, although I don't think it would be ideal for the Mavs to use him as a small ball 5. Well, sure, in Charlotte, both James Borrego and Steve Clifford deployed PJ as a small ball center in a ton of minutes to try and create a switch-all type of lineup, and while it did work to some degree offensively, the truth is, because PJ is an undersized big man, the Hornets' interior defense and rebounding suffered with him as their sole big man on the floor. But the good news for Dallas is that PJ doesn't really have to play as a small ball center for the team, with them already having a variety of big bodies like Dereck Lively, Daniel Gafford, or even Dwight Powell, except probably when they're really going to try and counter quicker lineups in the playoffs. At the end of the day, PJ Washington's floor for this Dallas team will likely be determined by how quickly he regains his shooting, but no matter what, right now, he's already a clear upgrade over what Grant Williams has been after his first 10 games in Dallas. Washington can do a little bit more with the ball than Williams, and is also more athletic and has a ton more range defensively. But more importantly, after acquiring both Washington and Gafford, Dallas now has a viable 10-man rotation with real depth at every position. And sure, while some of these players such as Jaden Hardy, Dante Exum, Dereck Lively, including Washington and Gafford are not yet proven playoff contributors, the thing is, Dallas has never had many backup plans this season. Say during those nights when Lively was in foul trouble, when Derrick Jones struggled to make shots, or even when they didn't have an ideal defender for an opponent's star power forward. But with this current roster that they have, Dallas now has more mix and match options to address their needs on both ends of the floor. And while there are still questions as to how this roster roster works out in the playoffs, Dallas still has around 30 games to figure things out before they get to the postseason. But also, I think an underrated part about these recent trades is that both PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford should maintain their current value in case Dallas recognizes that they're still missing something. If in case PJ becomes more efficient on offense as most players do next to Luka but doesn't have enough defensive bite, Dallas can always opt to trade him. PJ is signed for the next 2 seasons at about $15 million per year as a versatile 25-year-old wing and the mold that almost every NBA team wants. On the other hand, Daniel Gafford is also just 25 and has around $28 million left on his contract for the next 2 years. Should Dallas choose to package him for a bigger catch, he should easily be tradable given his skill set. And come to think of it, Dallas got these 2 players on the trade market without having to give up any of their young prospects such as Josh Green, Jaden Hardy, and Max Prosper. Dallas also added a couple future second-round picks from Charlotte, and that matters too because in the modern NBA, future second-round picks are now viewed more as currency than actual pieces to select a player in the draft. Basically, additional assets like this would just give Dallas more flexibility in terms of modifying their roster around Luka Doncic if this current lineup still doesn't work out. At the end of the day, what we're witnessing here is the Mavs front office not being afraid to make mistakes while trying to build the kind of team they've always envisioned. And by the looks of it, I think this current Mavs roster is the most well-balanced, most complementary two-way group they've ever assembled around Luka Doncic. But do you guys believe that this current Dallas Mavericks team has what it takes to make a deep run in the postseason? Feel free to drop your thoughts in the comment section below, and again, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing as well. Again, this is Real Balls, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.